Chosen one. You didn't stumble across this message. You were led here. That's not just poetic. That's prophetic. You've been asking for signs, for confirmation, for something real that speaks directly to your soul. And guess what? This is it. This is more than a video, more than words on a screen. This is alignment. This is activation. This is heaven tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you're not crazy. You're not forgotten. You're right on track. Only those who've walked through the fire, cried in silence, and kept showing up when no one clapped will feel this in their bones. You're not like the rest, and that's why this is hitting different. Because deep down, you know, you've been tested. Quietly, privately. And now, it's time. This message isn't for the faint of heart. It's for the resilient, the faithful, the ones who kept the faith even when the lights went out. You are chosen, and that's not a cliche. It's a calling. So before we dive in, take a second to feel that power rising inside of you. That's not hype. That's truth recognizing truth. And if you're already feeling that surge in your spirit, type "I'm ready" in the comments, because we're about to unlock revelation, clarity, and confirmation that proves one thing. You didn't just survive the test, you passed it. And now, the reward begins. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. There were stretches of time where everything around resembled a vast, dimly lit corridor. No echoes, no answers, just a maddening stillness that filled the air like smoke. Every cry seemed swallowed before reaching beyond the walls. Every effort to feel connected felt like reaching through glass. The silence wasn't soft, it roared. Doubt would creep in like fog under a door. Had something gone wrong? Had the direction been misread? Prayers became routines. The pages of sacred texts turned, but the weight of revelation felt missing. Still, there was no retreat. This was not absence, it was observation. A moment not of neglect, but of measurement. An invisible scale, testing the strength of devotion when stripped of confirmation. Like a sculptor walking away from the stone to see what shape remains. The questions weren't answered, but neither were they avoided. The noise of the world called, but the choice was made to stay in the quiet. No external rescue, no synthetic peace. Just endurance. And that endurance reshaped the soul. While others fled to distractions, to the illusion of control, or the comfort of noise, the choice here was to remain unshaken, to continue moving through a maze where the walls spoke nothing back. That kind of perseverance, rare as it is, speaks volumes louder than shouted declarations. It shows a bond not built on circumstance, but on conviction. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Now, after that long hush, the atmosphere shifts. The very silence that once weighed heavy now gives way to motion, an unseen arrangement of things finally making their way to the surface. Alignments are happening not by force, but by design. Momentum gathers. What once seemed delayed now rushes forward with perfect timing. The quiet was not wasted time. It was the forge. And this rising momentum, it's not coincidence, it's the unveiling of what was being prepared in the dark. Because belief was chosen when certainty was not given. Because loyalty endured without applause. What follows is not just reward, it is recognition. The next chapter carries echoes of that unseen resilience, not because of what was done in public, but because of what held firm in the hidden. The silence was the crucible. What comes now is its answer. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn. Isaiah 54:17. Sometimes God will let the weapon form, just to prove it won't work. And sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't in a stranger's hand, it's in the silence of a friend turned pretender. But hear me, chosen one, there's a deeper glory in surviving betrayal with your heart still beating in love. Let me tell you something. When the storm hits from within the house, that's when your faith gets real. That's when heaven watches close. This is not about being soft. This is about being set apart. There's a difference between breaking and bending. And though they tried to snap your spirit like a twig in winter, baby, you were rooted like an oak tree, planted by streams of living water. They tried to poke holes in your heart, but all they did was make room for grace to pour through. Come on now, that's not weakness, that's divine endurance. You see, spiritual maturity is not proven in the spotlight. It's proven in how you respond when the very ones you covered tried to cut you. When the hands you held are the same ones that let go without warning. And yet, you still loved, you still prayed, you still chose peace over payback. That's power. That's grown-up faith. That's Holy Spirit muscle. They didn't just fail you, they exposed themselves. And heaven allowed it, not to harm you, but to elevate you. You were never being buried. You were being planted. And what grows next is not bitterness. It's breakthrough. You could have told your side. You could have clapped back. You could have dragged names through the dirt. But you didn't. You laid it at God's feet. You took the high road with bruised knees and a tender heart. And now God is preparing a comeback that doesn't need a crowd because it's heaven-backed. So don't shrink. Don't second-guess your kindness. Your mercy was never wasted. It was witnessed. And the ones who misjudged you are about to see what favor really looks like. Keep your posture clean. Keep your spirit right. Because this next season, it's tailor-made for the ones who stayed soft in the furnace. And that's you, chosen one. That's you. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. This wasn't punishment. It was revelation. A slow unveiling of how deeply rooted your spirit really was. Would bitterness bloom? Would darkness make a home in your chest? Would vengeance become your compass? Or would you protect your light, even when shadows tried to engulf it? And though pain pulsed through your chest, like a second heartbeat, your soul didn't cave. Yes, emotions surged. Yes, the temptation to respond in kind throbbed loudly. But you chose to be led by something higher than retaliation. You whispered grace when thunder was expected. You guarded your character when it would have been easier to abandon it. You didn't let betrayal sculpt you into something smaller. You let it carve you into something deeper. Now, the air shifts. Not because your story needed defending, but because truth doesn't stay buried. What was distorted behind curtains is now being corrected under the sun. You don't need to speak your side. Your endurance does it for you. Restitution arrives not as revenge, but as restoration. Favor begins to locate you, not as compensation for pain, but as celebration of perseverance. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. Those silent sacrifices, those unseen tears, are now becoming seeds of elevation. This season isn't built on bitterness. It's rising from the ashes of tested love. And what they thought would destroy your essence has only deepened your radiance. Grace stood firm in the face of betrayal, and now the very heavens are acknowledging the weight of your choices. The scars did not make you fragile. They became proof that you chose to remain tender in a world that tried to harden you. What comes next isn't karma. It's a reward forged in restraint. You walked through the fire of human failure and emerged without turning to stone. That is more powerful than any revenge could ever be. Endurance doesn't always roar. It often whispers through clenched teeth and tired eyes. What most dismissed as stagnation was a hidden proving ground. The timeline stretched beyond logic. Milestones faded in the distance like mirages. Suggestions came cloaked as concern. Maybe it's time to pivot. Maybe it was never meant for you. But the resolve remained. Not because outcomes were guaranteed, but because the foundation was conviction, not convenience. The hardest part wasn't how long it took. It was carrying the weight of hope through days that looked unchanged, showing up when it felt like nothing was waiting on the other side, holding on to the thread of vision while everything else unraveled around it. This wasn't a delay caused by chance. It was a shaping of depth, not a denial, but a transformation. Time wasn't the obstacle, it was the tool. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. While shortcuts tempted and easy outs called with open arms, integrity remained the compass. Invitations to settle knocked, but they were left unanswered. What grew in the quiet was more than just patience. It was strength, layered with humility. It was character carved without applause. It was belief forged in the furnace of not yet. And though the answers were slow, the commitment didn't flinch. Those quiet days, where nothing shifted but the date, held more power than most will ever recognize. Each moment of doubt pushed through became a step forward, not visible to others, but seen fully by the one who never stopped watching. While others abandoned dreams for the comfort of now, a greater promise was being prepared, one that could only rest in hands trained to wait, not demand. Now, the pace changes. What once dragged begins to move, like a current breaking loose. The process wasn't to frustrate, it was to fortify. The gates that once held back progress now swing with purpose, not out of luck, but alignment. Not because everything suddenly worked, but because endurance finally met its moment. This shift is not a sudden twist of fate. It's the arrival of what was always coming, just waiting until the weight could be carried. This isn't a lucky break. It's the fruit of unwavering focus, of unseen perseverance, of choosing not to bow to urgency when purpose required preparation. It took longer, yes, but now acceleration replaces delay. Forward replaces stillness, not because of perfect timing, but because of perfect trust. Every silent moment, every quiet step, every decision to keep going without validation. It's all echoing back now, not as noise, but as confirmation. What felt wasted was being compounded. And what's unfolding now is not compensation. It's the manifestation of maturity that never quit. Let's not soften the truth. You endured a kind of silence that didn't just echo, it emptied rooms. Connections frayed. Familiar faces became distant memories. The warmth of old routines faded into shadows, and everything that once brought ease started to feel too small, too loud, or too dim. The spaces that once fit you suddenly could not contain your unfolding. And so began the separation. Not because you failed, but because you were being called elsewhere, somewhere quieter, somewhere deeper. The stillness wasn't a punishment. It was an invitation, a moment carved out of time, asking if you'd reach for your past out of nostalgia or move forward despite the ache. The crossroads were clear. Turn back to the noise that numbed or keep walking through the stillness that refined. And though the silence stung and the loneliness hollowed, the choice was made, not to return, not to what was once enough, not to what once held you. Yes, temptation lingered. There were moments when returning to the old paths looked easier than wandering through the unfamiliar. But even when the road narrowed and the nights felt longer, you refused to trade growth for comfort. You chose not to shrink for acceptance. You resisted the pull of old patterns disguised as safety. The echoes of what once was could not compete with the quiet certainty that transformation was happening, even if unseen. No one saw the nights spent untangling the noise inside. No one felt the weight of your questions, the tug between holding on and letting go. But there, in that sacred solitude, something shifted. What felt like absence became revelation. What felt like loss became alignment. The disconnection was never a void. It was a space being cleared for something new to take root. And now, what felt like abandonment is unveiling itself as preparation. The very disconnection that once stung is now making room for connections laced with purpose. Where isolation once stood, clarity now rises. Not just about people, but about who you've become when no one was watching. This expansion isn't random. It's what happens when you refuse to let your past reattach itself to your progress. The doors opening now aren't opening because you force them. They're opening because you were patient enough to grow into their shape. Relationships that once felt distant are being replaced by ones that are divinely timed. Opportunities are aligning with the version of you that emerged from the cocoon, not the one who entered it. You didn't retreat when everything felt stripped away. You didn't rebuild on cracked foundations. You let the old version of life fall apart so a truer one could form. That is why this moment is not luck. It's legacy. It's the outcome of walking through emptiness and discovering you were never actually alone. It's the arrival of what can only come to those who didn't go back. Some people carry the weight of being wronged without ever letting it deform their integrity, and you did just that. You watched fairness bend in ways that should have broken your spirit. You bore the sting of twisted narratives and false assumptions without defending yourself with the same tools used against you. Those you poured into, those you covered in their lowest moments, they were the very ones who carved silence around your name and watched as others misunderstood you. You had the power to retaliate. You held the truth like a blade in your hand. And still, you chose not to swing. Not because you lacked the strength, but because you understood that true strength doesn't clamor to be seen. It stands unmoved. The trial wasn't just what they did, it was how you would carry yourself through it. Would the injustice rewire your soul? Would resentment replace your peace? Or would your roots go deeper into righteousness, even when the soil turned to ash? It was a crossroad few recognize, and many fail, because it's easy to mirror offense. It's natural to lash out when you're misread. But you took the higher trail, the one with no crowd, the one lit only by quiet resolve. While whispers tried to paint a false picture, you let the silence speak for you. You didn't answer slander with slander. You let your growth tell the truth they tried to bury. This was not weakness, it was restraint, drenched in purpose. You asked for guidance when revenge whispered your name. You chose to remain anchored while your emotions screamed for validation. And though it cost you comfort, reputation, connection, you knew peace couldn't be built with borrowed rage. You refused to let their fire consume your clarity. And now, what was done in shadows is being overturned by light. Not by your hand, but by the steady unveiling of justice that flows beyond human orchestration. Restoration is already unfolding, not as revenge, but as reordering. Not for spectacle, but for significance. You're not walking into this new season by accident. You're walking in as someone who held their ground in a storm others never saw. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. Doors are opening where blockades once stood. Favor is flowing where doubt once surrounded. And the ones who once misjudged will witness a rise they never imagined, because you never stooped to force it. You let patience speak. You let character last longer than conflict. And that is why this moment is layered in clarity and crowned in grace. This isn't just about being lifted up. It's about being lifted up clean, not with the residue of bitterness, but with the shine of resilience. You chose the harder way, and now it's producing a harvest that no lie can touch. What was meant to break you only refined what was already pure. And now, the results are visible, not as revenge, but as undeniable proof. Even injustice couldn't shake your foundation. Some people only shine when the spotlight finds them, but you learned how to burn quietly, faithfully, behind the curtain. There were days you stood in rooms with empty hands and still offered what little you had left. You gave from a well that felt cracked. You held others together while silently unraveling inside. While many were shouting their struggle for sympathy, you whispered your surrender and kept moving forward. The trial wasn't about how much you lacked, it was about how deeply you trusted through it. The spotlight never lingered. The applause never came. Still, you stayed grounded, not in pride, but in purpose. You weren't chasing attention. You were choosing integrity. You weren't parading your pain. You were cultivating strength in silence. That was the test, not of status or skill, but of soul posture. And while others sprinted ahead by cutting corners or shouting louder, you walked steadily with nothing to prove. You didn't force your name into conversations. You didn't water down your values to fit in. You didn't demand what wasn't yet yours. You waited, even when the waiting felt like standing still on trembling ground. Because your focus wasn't on how high you could climb. It was on how true you could remain. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. You gave when it cost you. You stayed when it strained you. You chose kindness when disappointment wrapped itself around your chest. You didn't let weariness become an excuse to lash out. You didn't let emptiness justify bitterness. And that quiet nobility, the kind that blooms in hidden valleys, is what heaven saw, even when the world didn't. The humility that formed in those silent seasons didn't make you small. It made you steady. It built the kind of foundation that success can safely rest on. Now, as this shift begins, it's not the result of hustling or hype. It's the outpouring of unseen obedience. The doors opening now weren't forced. They're answering a life lived with honor. This isn't random favor, it's response. To every quiet thank you spoken through tears, to every unseen act of service done without a spotlight, to every moment you let grace lead when grief tried to steal the wheel. This is not a twist of fate, this is the unfolding of faith. Not because you made noise, but because you made room. What's arriving now isn't just increase, it's evidence. Evidence that a life rooted in surrender always grows, even if it takes time to be seen. You didn't bend low to be pitied. You bowed in reverence. You weren't shrinking. You were settling into sacred strength. And now, the rise is here, not to inflate ego, but to fulfill purpose. You didn't pass this test by pretending to be strong. You passed it by choosing to remain pure when no one was watching. And now, the lifting isn't just external, it's spiritual, purposeful, divine. Everything growing now was planted in the quiet soil of humility. And the harvest? It's proof that heaven always honors what man forgets. It takes uncommon courage to stay prepared in silence. When no one is clapping, no one is watching, and no one seems to notice the consistency behind the curtain. You carried your calling through days of invisibility, kept your craft sharp without an audience, and tended the quiet corners of your purpose like sacred ground. And while doubt whispered that you'd been passed over, something deeper in you knew this wasn't neglect. It was calibration. This wasn't stagnation. It was strategy. A time sealed not to punish you, but to shape you beyond what surface-level exposure ever could. Because you weren't just being hidden. You were being entrusted. The stillness wasn't void. It was design. Each unnoticed effort was marked. Each silent act of obedience documented. The absence of recognition became the very place your authenticity was proven. You stood firm while others sprinted for platforms. You chose to grow when the quicker option was to be seen too soon. You didn't need flashing lights to validate your value. You understood that becoming rooted beneath the surface meant you could carry more when the time came. That restraint wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. The real test wasn't if you could shine, it was if you would stay lit when no one was looking. Would you keep refining what no one affirmed? Would you show up fully when the room echoed with emptiness? Would you still protect the vision when no one was applauding its early form? You did, and that's what set the stage for what's coming next. Now, the shift is here, not because you maneuvered your way forward, but because your readiness drew it in. It's not a performance, it's a release. Access is arriving, not because you demanded it, but because you became it. The time in obscurity wasn't wasted. It was writing the strength in your bones, the clarity in your voice, and the depth in your mission. Doors are swinging not out of sympathy, but out of alignment. Opportunities are landing without announcement. The very silence you once questioned is now confirming what you always carried. This isn't a launch, it's an unveiling. The hidden years weren't holding you back. They were holding you steady, building capacity, keeping you untouched by the noise that craves instant applause. What you've built in private will now ripple in places your feet haven't yet touched, not because you hustled louder, but because you prepared deeper. This moment isn't magic, it's maturity, and the weight of what's being placed in your hands can only rest on the shoulders of someone who trained for it in stillness. This isn't the beginning of your journey. It's the manifestation of everything you became while no one was looking. The reward is not just the platform, it's the peace of knowing you didn't rush the becoming. And now, what's rising around you is simply meeting the readiness within you.